to talk about this, we're now joined by the campaign strategist. Michele Cadario is the CEO of Vanguard Strategy and a former national campaign director for the Liberals. Cheryl Oates, principal at GT, most recently the campaign director for the Saskatchewan NDP, and Jordan Paquet, vice president at Blue Sky Strategy Group and was deputy campaign manager for the PEI PSC party in the last provincial campaign. Hello, all three of you.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Hello. So listen, I'm going to begin here with the polls because while most are showing this Liberal lead, we do have a couple of polls that stand out. Nanos still has the Liberals and Conservatives tied. Excuse me, Abacus still has those two parties tied. And Nanos is now talking about a tightening of the numbers. So I'm wondering what you guys take out of that polling. Jordan, I'll begin with you.
Sure. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's an election campaign, and numbers are going to go up and down. We were expecting this. I think what I've kind of been looking at the Liberal numbers before, and what often happens is that a leader will start to get a honeymoon period after they come into office. But in this particular case, going into an election, there's a possibility that's happening that he perhaps peaked a bit too soon. And is maybe now starting to come down a bit as the campaign goes on. We're still not even at the halfway point of the campaign. So there's still time for the Conservatives to still overtake them in the polls. And I think this resonates with what people in the Conservative campaign are feeling on the ground. They're feeling that momentum. They're feeling the crowd sizes coming out. And so I think, as we see this campaign go on, it's going to be a very close race with a very high voter turnout.
Okay. Michele, what do you think? Did the Liberals peak too soon?
Well, I can't help myself but laugh at the irony of peaking too soon in the pollings. But in any case, listen, it's a close race, without question. There is one ballot box question that's out there for Canadians about who they want to deal with Donald Trump. And that's why you're seeing consistently that the other parties have really faded away and people are making a decision between two men. And they are, Mark Carney is polling far ahead of the Liberal Party, where in contrast, Pierre Poilievre is actually polling behind his own party. The head-to-head numbers are very strong in Mr. Carney's favor, but I don't know that anybody in the Liberal ranks is going to be taking that as a done deal. I think there's still a lot of time to go. This is kind of like that middle week where it's kind of slow and dragging on. The finish line seems forever ago, and it feels like the campaign started a million years ago as well. But then come next week, once we get into the debates, it's all going to go very, very quickly. And I think that Canadians will start to make up their minds even more so. I think what we have seen is that the voter pool for the Liberals has definitely increased. And I think that all parties are seeing have a soft vote right now. So I do think it can still sway back either way. And it's really going to be just the measure of, in this case, the man who is leading these parties as to who's going to come out on top in the end.
Cheryl, what do you make of the situation? Is the honeymoon, fading for Mr. Carney and the Liberals right now?
Well, I was listening to what Jordan said, and having been on the inside of a number of campaigns and a number of campaigns where the polling wasn't exactly what we hoped it would be, campaigns tell themselves a story. You got to keep morale high. You got to keep going. And I think, the Conservatives are telling themselves a story right now. But if you look at the broader polls, not talking about the overnight tracking polls, which are much smaller sample sizes, and, any peaks or minor blips in those should just be taken as that when you're looking at a day-by-day basis. But if you look at the bigger polls and you look at those who were sampled just as the writ was dropping, and then you look at those same companies that have now done a second round of polling into the campaign, there really isn't much movement right now. Like, the Liberals are still polling ahead. They still have much greater vote efficiency, which means that their numbers need to be lower for them to get a majority. And the Conservatives are still sitting where the Conservatives are. Now, I think we're going to talk about the Conservatives have a ton of excitement and momentum on the ground, but does that translate into the numbers that they need and the seat count that they need to actually pull this off? The polling would say no.
Okay, well, let me pick up on that point, though, because you're right. I do want to talk about the Conservatives as well. And Jordan, you mentioned the fact that you have these large numbers at the rally. Last night, estimated by the RCMP, somewhere between 9,000 to 12,000 for, I think, the 11th rally of the Conservative campaign already in this day 17, if I have that correctly. So, and then we also see, Stephen Harper come in and give his endorsement to Pierre Poilievre. But I'm wondering, Michele, how important is that endorsement? Does it help build a greater coalition for Mr. Poilievre, or is this essentially preaching to the converted?
Well, I think it would have been quite shocking to Canadians if he endorsed anybody else. I don't think it's a big surprise. I think it's an acknowledgement, probably on the Conservative campaign's behalf, that they do need some help in terms of perhaps bridging back to the coalition that Mr. Harper put together that was successful. And also he has some stature of having been on the world stage. Now, having said all of that, it's Mark Carney who was actually asked by Mr. Harper to be a finance minister, and never Pierre Poilievre to deal with any kind of economic crisis or the like. So I think that's kind of refueled that. But I'm also going to say the crowd sizes have been impressive. Less impressive is how Pierre Poilievre wants to keep talking about them, because the more he does that, the more he reminds us of, Donald Trump down south. Donald Trump is the only other person, the only other politician who talks about his crowd sizes, and as a kind of harbinger of that campaign, and his stunning shock that because of his crowd sizes he didn't win against Biden, and we all know where that all kind of led. So very impressive organizationally, but I'm not sure that it actually is any kind of sign that there's this unknown groundswell that's not being captured in polls.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I hear Jordan right behind me trying to get in on this.
Sure, I think there's more people talking about crowd size. I mean, if you look at some of Mark Carney's top campaign strategists on Twitter or X, they're trying to talk about Carney's crowd sizes. They did it all during his leadership. The only reason they're doing it now is because they show a constant loop going around a block, because it can't really compete with the Conservative one. So, I mean, I think they're seeing it too. They would love to pull out this number of crowds. Does it reflect in the polls necessarily? But maybe not. But still, it gives momentum. It gives good visuals. And it just gives that boost to the ground troops, because this is going to be a close election, as we all agree. What it's going to come down to is who's going to have that best ground game to really pull people out to vote. And right now it's looking at the Conservatives overwhelmingly have the most volunteers, the most money, and the most energy right now heading into what will be the second half of the campaign next week.
Okay, Cheryl, what do you say to that? Does the crowd size matter? Does Stephen Harper's endorsement matter to anyone who isn't already self-identified as a Conservative?
I think there's a couple of things, and I agree. The Conservative crowd sizes have been really impressive, but everyone who's been on a campaign knows that if you want to pull off massive rallies like the ones that Conservatives have been doing, somewhere else has to give. So that means you're pulling people off doors. It means you're pulling candidates off doors. Hopefully they're collecting data off of all of this, but it doesn't necessarily translate into vote. And at this moment in time, at this current context in Canada, not everybody who's deeply interested in politics is feeling the spirit of going out and raising up a sign and chanting for their colleague, or chanting for their candidate, because this is a tough time in Canada. And those who are leaning towards Mark Carney, a lot of them are looking for stability. And stability is just not that exciting. It's not as fun to go hold up a sign at a rally and say, rah, rah, stability. So I do think that it is a show of force for the Conservatives, but that's not to say that Mark Carney doesn't have the kind of support just because he's not the kind of guy that pulls off a rally or isn't attracting the kind of crowd that would attend a rally.
Okay. Listen, we talked about Paul Chang last week, and I want to pick up a conversation on nominations before we're done today, because Paul Chang did withdraw as a Liberal candidate, but there are now questions being raised about two Conservative candidates, Aaron Gunn in BC, who's made comments in the past denying the deadly impact of residential schools, Andrew Lawton in Ontario, who reportedly is part of a chat group with convoy organizers and far-right social media organizers as well. Will these two candidates, Jordan, end up hurting the Conservative campaign?
Look, I think this information's kind of been out there for a while. Both candidates, I believe, have explained it. In Andrew Lawton's case, I think he ran provincially. Some of this came out then. So I think this is kind of beyond that. Might have some impact locally, distract some stakeholders, but overall, by and large, as we get going into the campaign, I think people will move on.
Are you surprised they were dropped, though? Because the party was quick in dropping other candidates.
Yeah, and I think that's because some of those situations where people were dropped, there was information that wasn't known that came out, perhaps wasn't disclosed. I think the party knew about some of the information that was out there. Both of these candidates had explained their positions on these instances a number of times. So I think that was good enough for the party in these particular cases.
Mm-hmm. Michele, are you surprised that they haven't been dropped? Are they going to hurt the campaign for the Conservatives?
Well, I think it's a measure of Mr. Poilievre, right? You get judged by the people that are in your that you endorse as your candidates. You have to sign off on their papers. You know, and just as I was disappointed that Mr. Chang wasn't released earlier, but then was finally done it by Mr. Carney, I'm shocked actually that Pierre Poilievre doesn't see that seems to say that this is the type of person he wants on his campaign. Fair ball. That's saying way more about him, and kind of reinforcing the very kind of narrow structured campaign that they have, that seemed to have been made up when in a different time, you know, when Justin Trudeau was Prime Minister, when the carbon tax was still in effect. And you know, it's a different day, and I think that there's different expectations of who Canadians are looking for to be part of that team to, again, go after what is actually the existential threat of Donald Trump.
Cheryl?
I am shocked, especially in Aaron Gunn's case. Like, maybe these issues were known, but it's crazy that the Conservatives would keep him as a candidate despite the things that he said. He's said that residential schools are something that First Nations wanted. He's saying that what happened to First Nations across Canada does not amount to genocide. And people in BC, MLAs in BC, have been removed from the provincial caucus for saying things quite similar to this, but yet the Conservatives federally are willing to keep someone with these views. And yes, Jordan, you said they've come out and explained it, but they haven't really. They've kind of gaslit everybody and said, no, he's always stood with First Nations, which isn't really addressing the point. It's just skating over it. And I do think this really matters to the people in that community. I think that these issues really matter to British Columbia. But of course, it has impacts across Canada because people across Canada care about how we talk about First Nations issues as well. So I do think holding on to Aaron Gunn as a candidate does have big implications.
Okay, so big implications. Listen, I'm going to squeeze in something very quickly. I'm going to ask you, Cheryl, right now, because, you know, Michele was talking earlier about the voter pool now available to Liberals. Well, that pool, if you keep going, and this is week 3 of polling, is essentially in the NDP pool that they're dipping into right now. Does the NDP campaign have to change, do you think?
Well, the NDP campaign has from the beginning been a really targeted campaign. So, you know, the cap is $30 million. The NDP has been spending $30 million shoring up incumbents. And a couple of things have happened here. One is the NDP is making a really clear case about why they are relevant to Parliament, why keeping the NDP maintains the things and continues to fight for the things that so many Canadians care about, like healthcare. And also, as the Liberals move just a little bit further to the center, the NDP does have more of a contrast as they sit on the left flank of politics, really campaigning for public services and campaigning for those things that people in incumbent NDP ridings have voted NDP for in the past.
Okay. Well, we're tracking that, and I'm sorry that we ran out of time, but we're going to touch upon that, obviously, as the campaign goes on. But for now, Jordan, Michele, Cheryl, thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.